to welcome this packed house to the second of 6 talks in our 2025-2026 lecture series. My name is Jennifer Esposito. I'm a faculty member, and along with Dustin Balin, I am the co-chair of this year's lecture committee. We're very grateful to have a number of sponsors who help make sure that these events are successful and that we're able to bring in the caliber of speakers that we have tonight. Those sponsors include Diamond & Schmidt, the Ontario Association of Architects, BDP Quadrangle, Thames Valley Brick and Tile, TPL Lighting, and Core Architects. There are also OAA credits available for this event, so if you are an OAA member, please pick up your certificate outside this room at the end of the event. I'd also like to thank our fantastic IT team, Ivan and Leo, who you've seen running around, Francisco and Alex, who keep this lecture series running, as well as our volunteers, which I will get to in a minute. And tonight I have actually one more announcement. So one of our guests, Arancha, will be actually giving a building tour later this year, hosted by Building Equality and Architecture Toronto. So if you're interested in that building tour, please follow the website and the newsletter for more information on that event. And with that, I'd like to turn over the mic to one of our volunteers, Isabel Morris, to give a land acknowledgement and introduce our guests.
Okay, so before we begin this year's second lecture of the DAS lecture series, it is important to recognize that Toronto is a part of the Dish with One Spoon territory. It is also important to acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Tonight, we are lucky to have not one but both founding principals of Odami, Arancha, González, Bernardo, and Michael Fohring. Born and raised in the Asturias region of Spain, Arancha grew up playing and helping out in her family's busy fabric and clothing shops. She carried forward a strong relationship with composition and materials, as well as a creative pragmatism in designing spaces that are jointly functional, welcoming, and resonant. Arancha studied architecture in the Escuela Técnica Superior de Arquitectura in La Coruña, and has worked with award-winning design firms in Spain, Austria, Montreal, and Toronto. In addition to leading Odami, she also teaches at the Toronto Metropolitan School for Interior Design. Michael grew up in Ontario, Canada, in a family of carpenters, mechanics, and general tinkerers. Prior to studying architecture, he worked on construction sites and developed a deep interest in craft, assemblage, and making. This drove a desire to uncover more efficient and compelling approaches to design and fabrication. Michael studied architecture at McGill University in Montreal, where upon graduation, he was named to the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada Honor Roll. He was also awarded the American Institute of Architects Henry Adams Medal and the REIC Student Medal. Since 2017, he has taught as a sessional lecturer at the University of Waterloo School of Architecture and the Toronto Metropolitan University School of Interior Design. Together in 2018, Toronto, Ontario, they launched Odami, an architecture and design-focused firm whose work, as I'm sure you will soon see, ingeniously embraces the beauty of difference. They use simple design gestures to imprint a presence. These simple design gestures are evidently provoked by the contemporary multiculturalism of the city and emerging of design values and histories. So please put your hands together and give a warm welcome to Arancha and Michael.
Thank you very much for the warm introduction. And thank you very much for inviting us to be part of this lecture series. We're both very, very grateful to be invited and very excited to be here tonight. So as you can see, the title of the talk is Behind the Work, Tales and Lessons from Running a Small Practice. When asked to be a part of the lecture series, we thought it was sort of a nice opportunity to talk about stuff that we thought we would like to have had a lecture about when we were in school, and maybe hear about some things, some lessons that we would have liked to have been told somewhere down the line before we did the crazy thing of starting our own practice. So it's going to be a little bit atypical. We're going to focus much less on like digging into the work itself, a little bit less theory-based. And instead, we're going to really sort of take a bit more of a candid and down-to-earth reflection on, what it's really like to run a small practice, because, like so many things, it can be very over-romanticized and not so often talked about. Arancha and I started Odami in 2018 under less than ideal circumstances. We didn't study in Toronto. We didn't grow up in Toronto. Arancha grew up in Spain and moved here in 2014. We have no architects in the family. We didn't have really any financial support, so we were very much on our own from the very beginning. And while that was, of course, very difficult, it also meant that we had to learn a lot and very, very quickly, very often the hard way. And so we thought that, we would be able to share some of what we've learned along the way. So that hopefully when some of you consider starting your own practice down the road, hopefully some of these lessons will, you'll be remembered and make things maybe a little bit easier for you. So we're going to walk through several of these lessons since we started the practice and sort of, use projects to kind of illustrate some of these things that we've learned. The first lesson then is to not fake it until you make it. Of course, this is very much an expression that we hear thrown around so much. And we found that the opposite to actually be much better. So when we, and I think the very first project that we did is, very much I think a good example of this. We started the firm with Sarah Restaurant, and when we were approached to do this, it was by a friend of a friend of a former colleague. They were opening up their second restaurant in Toronto, right downtown. They had seen a small project that we had done, exhibited in Design TO earlier that year. And, at this point, we hadn't been working in the field for very long after graduation. Arancha had a few more years of experience than I had, but, we also weren't overwhelmingly happy in our jobs. And so when we were approached with this, the client seemed to be very design oriented. It was a restaurant right downtown. It just sort of seemed like the possibility sort of outweighed, at least we thought, outweighed the risks. And so, we decided to take a jump. And there's really no perfect time to do this. You sort of just have to assess the situation as it comes. There's sort of this conception, this idea that like you have to work very, 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 very long, and that has tremendous value, but sometimes things just come your way and you need to seize that moment and not let it pass you by. So at this point, of course, we were very comfortable with drawing and modeling and rendering. This was the final design rendering of the first floor dining space. But this was what we were met with when we did our site visit for the first time. So we were brought into the project after demo had really already, been mostly completed. The space was completely gutted, basically top to bottom. And so you realize like very, very sharply right away, this like massive gap. This like massive gap between, what we're comfortable with drawing, modeling, rendering, and the nuts and bolts of actually building. Like we had, of course, had experience working in practices, but it was largely on, competitions and on the design phase of projects. But, we didn't really get to see a project of this scale all the way through to completion. So we very much had this sort of imposter syndrome, facing this task. And we came to realize that you sort of have like two ways of approaching that. You can do the, wear a mask and sort of hide it and pretend like you know what you're doing, fake it till you make it. Or you can sort of, accept this humbly, which is, absolutely terrifying, of course. But I guess we're masochists, and that was sort of like the direction that we chose to take. And I think the ceiling of the space, I mean, there's many stories that I think could exemplify this, but probably the ceiling was probably the best example. The existing space was a two-story house sort of split into apartments on each of the two levels. And the upper floor had a sort of like an attic space that was part of the second floor apartment. We blew that out completely to really create this large, expansive second floor dining space. And the team on site was struggling to like really understand and picture the geometry. Reflected ceiling plans, they're sometimes not the easiest tool to communicate a complex geometry like this. So we 3D printed a model and brought this on site to sort of walk through everything with the team. And when we came back a few days later, we discovered that the team on site came up with this really ingenious solution of tying these colored strings between all of the vertices in the space to really trace out all of the ridges and valleys. And then it was sort of this like really interesting moment where, you could see the ingenuity and just the knowledge and experience of the teams on site, and what they can really bring to the table, and these creative, unexpected ways of translating, that the way that we work into ways that are maybe sometimes more, tangible, understandable for them. And this helped like immensely with ceiling framing. The ceiling went up like really, really quickly, actually. Same thing with the drywall. When you have excellent framing, nice clean framing, you're going to end up, most times with like nice clean drywall. That was very much the case here. And then this was the resulting dining space on the second floor. So this is sort of like one small story of many from this project. We were on site like pretty much every single day throughout this project for like months and months and months. And it showed us sort of how important it is to approach problems with humility and with a kind of willingness to listen to and learn from the team on site as well. Rather than coming in and sort of barking orders and pretending that we knew better. Far too often there's a sort of defensive dynamic, I guess, between trades and architects. I experienced this myself I was working on site for combined about close to 2 years. And we always knew every day that an architect was showing up on site, and you could sort of like feel this wave of discomfort like wash over everyone. Everyone was like very on edge. And of course, as architects, we bring all kinds of knowledge and training. And we want the building to perform, look a particular way. But it's also really critical to value and recognize, the experience that the trades bring to the table, and be open to working with them on the same level. I think this is like so important to establishing like a really strong level of like respect and rapport. Because when you're sort of just pretending everything, like they know and they can sniff it out, and it's a really, really bad look. And the other sort of parallel part of like maintaining respect on site is the power of actually being able to like say that you don't know something and go and get an answer promptly. Of course, very important to go and get that answer, but being able to say no, you don't know something. This is very common. It happens to everybody, no matter your experience, for all kinds of reasons. But being able to sort of go away very humbly and saying, I don't know, I'll find this, getting the answer, it builds trust. And it also builds a sort of, a level of like human rapport. And it's also an opportunity to learn. Admitting you don't know something and then going out and finding it, of course, it's actually like a really powerful opportunity, and it's born out of humility. So this we found like a very early on, fortunately, and it's carried us through ever since. Really not faking it at all, as much as we can, anyway.
So the lesson 2 would be create your own opportunities. At this moment in time, we had finalized Sarah. It got published. We were starting to be a bit known, but still like in a big city, not having connections. We were hoping that we were going to be getting work right afterwards, and it didn't happen. So what happens when you don't have work? Did we panic? We absolutely did. But after weeks of panicking, I think I panicked for longer than you did. But after panic, we had to do something about it. And the truth of the matter was that the lack of work means excess of time, which is a luxury. So it was like, what can we do with this excess of time that we have? And what was seemingly like a problem, obviously we had a business, we have bills to pay, so we needed the work, but at the same time it was like, there's nothing we can do. So this time that we have, how can we do it to improve, to look at ourselves and see how can we become better, more attractive to clients, what it is that we can do. So at that time, this is my kitchen table, and that's our cat. At that time, I'm a licensed architect in Spain, but in Canada, I'm not an architect. I couldn't stamp. And at that time, we couldn't stamp anything. So this time that I had, it was like, I'm going to start preparing my BCIN exams. So I prepared my BCIN exams, and we were able to now stamp Part 9 drawings, Part 9 buildings, which we couldn't before. So this is something that I would have not been able to prepare because of the time that it required. If we had during SARA, for instance, we didn't have time to do that. So this was one of the things that it was like, okay, now at least there's a degree of a type of buildings that we're able to stamp, and that's increasing our chances of like getting work. Secondly, we were very aware that our portfolio was SARA. Our portfolio. Any other problem, any other project.
Had problems.
We had problems. We didn't have projects. Yeah. So a contractor had brought in like a project to do a small interior renovation. It didn't pan out, so it didn't work out. But we had we had the existing drawings of that house. So we had that conversation where we were like, we need to create portfolio pieces. So what if we do this project on our own? There's no budget, there's no client, and it's an opportunity to show who we are as designers and to show what it is that we can do, to start to define ourselves from a creative standpoint. So we started developing this project, and parallel to creating pieces that we could show as a portfolio, it gave us a purpose. Having a purpose, I think, is the dangerous thing when you don't have work. Is suddenly you wake up and it's like, what do I do? Like, so this became like something to do, something to look forward to put our energy there. And we designed the whole project, and Michael's like a pretty talented renderer. So we rendered the project. This is the exterior. And these are a couple of shots of the interior. It was like fun. There was no issues with structural, no issues with HVAC, no budget considerations. It was like perfect. So after we did this, we kind of thought that maybe by the time we're done with this, we'll have some work. We didn't. So another project came, and this project was a big one for us, and I'll explain why. We always had this interest in furniture design, and while we were working on SARA, because we had that attitude that Michael was saying, like we were able to let go a bit of that ego, because when you don't know, you sometimes just have to not know and listen to people that know better. We had a very good relationship with the mill worker that did all the furniture for the restaurant. So this is Patrick, introducing Patrick in the lecture. Patrick, like us, had his own shop. He was a woodworker, a very skilled woodworker. And after SARA ended, we stayed in touch. And like ourselves, I think when you run a small business, some of the problems are very similar. He was saying like, I have enough work for millwork, but I'm very skilled. I really want to show that I can do nice furniture. However, I don't have the design skills. And we were like, we want to do furniture. We have the design skills, but we don't know how to work with wood. So this was a conversation that kind of like died out. And then one day, Patrick was talking to Michael, and he mentioned that he had to go to his parents' property somewhere north of Toronto because they had this beautiful, huge red oak that had died. And it was clear that eventually it was going to fall. So he wanted to take it down before it fell. So we were talking to him, and we were like, is it red oak? Can we do furniture with red oak? And he said like, yes, we can. We just have to treat the wood. So it was like free material. That was what we thought. And basically between him and I, we proposed, we were like, why don't we design a line of furniture that can showcase what we can do as designers, but that also can showcase what you can do as a woodworker. So basically, this was the beginning of En Masse, and basically what our design was trying to explore, like how massive this tree was, and create pieces that would celebrate that life of a tree and the immense mass that it got to develop before, unfortunately, it stopped. Its lifespan came to an end. So we met with Patrick for several months, and he was working on prototypes. We were like designing, he was giving us feedback. And again, this was again purpose and learning a lot of things that we didn't know because we were not woodworkers. So after the pieces were done, we went to Design TO together. And this was a collaboration that we did with him. And in addition to Design TO, we also went to IDS, to the prototype section. We created a lamp, chair, and a table. To IDS, we took the chair, and it was like a very comfortable chair, the heaviest chair I've ever seen in my life because it was all solid wood. It was just carved out. But we went there and ultimately it put our name out there. We learned a lot and we had to spend some money to treat the wood in order to be able to be able to make furniture with it. We didn't sell a single piece. Nothing ever came out of it. But the truth of the matter is that when Aesop, to date, Aesop has been our biggest client. When Aesop found us, they found us because they looked on IDS and they looked at the designers that were on IDS. They saw these pieces of furniture and they liked them. Then they went on our website, they saw Sarah and they liked it. And that's how Aesop reached out to us. So while we didn't sell a single piece of furniture, at the end of the day, I think that it paid off a lot doing this type of things. And it became clear that you have to have an opportunistic mindset and create your own opportunities and use the time, because time is our currency. So when there's no work, the good side of that is that you have plenty of time. And also as creatives, I think especially in architecture and design, there's always this like we're all exhausted. So it's also good when you have the time to be able to look after yourself, to be able to do things that you like, go for a walk, because ultimately we are creatives. And when you are exhausted, it's impossible to produce good work. So these were like 3 things that we were able to do thanks to not having work. The problem was still there, but I think that we made the most out of it.
And so the next lesson, okay. The next lesson that we learned was another one that was very, very, very much learned the hard way and with consequence. And this was, to define your role and the importance of that. And we learned that very, very, I don't know if that, okay. Sorry. And we learned this on our first residential project, which was this house in Deer Park here in Toronto that wrapped up in 2021. So the scope for this project, it wasn't like a full gut reno, but it was sort of like a modest modification of the layout on the first and second floors, where we sort of like opened up the kitchen and dining areas to each other and to the back, to the backyard. You can see that on the sort of like the upper right side of the ground floor plan. Second floor, sort of opening up the bedrooms. The family had two children that were just starting university, but were living at home, so they sort of needed their own space. And then expanding or converting the master bedroom into an office for the 2 homeowners, and then building an entirely new 3rd floor under a new roof, which would be the master suite. So like a fairly substantial scope of work. And this was the first proposal that we actually put together for this project, because for Sarah, it was like basically a handshake and that was kind of it. It was like super informal, really stupid. But again, making mistakes. So with the first proposal, we made a million mistakes on that proposal, but I think one of the biggest things that we did was not like really clearly delineating what our scope was, like what the deliverables would be, where like our responsibilities would end and someone like the GC's responsibilities would start. It's like very easy for that to be a sort of like slippery slope into taking on way too much responsibility if you don't make it like really, really crystal clear. Listing how many meetings you're going to have as part of this, the contract, things like that. We didn't make many of these terms very explicit at all, and we kind of paid the price. Because I mean, construction is super, super complicated and very long process, especially for a project of this scope, which is, I mean, somewhat modest, but it's enough that, I mean, this was like a 9-month build or something like that. Yeah. And like lots and lots of people involved, lots and lots of steps involved. So if you're not delineating what your role is, you can be in trouble. You know, like getting just something like this that looks like a fairly simple space. You know, we expanded the interior entry space into what used to be like an exterior niche under this like vaulted ceiling. So I mean, here, you know, it's like you have framers involved, electricians, millwork. You're coordinating that with the flooring, 2 different types of flooring, the wood on the stairs, the marble in the front, ordering a door, etc. Like all of these little moments, there's so many of these layers behind, you know, this relatively simple staircase with a relatively simple railing. It's complex framing, it's complex drywalling and metal fabrication. You know, here, this is the landing on the 3rd floor at the top of the stairs, where we sort of like sculpted the ceiling underneath the new roof line, new skylights. And this was all sort of, I mean, it's sculpted to have a nice sculptural moment, but also to hide HVAC as well. So all of these, you know, additional trades here, not just like the drywall and the framing and skylight, but, you know, bringing in, coordinating all of this with HVAC. So many layers, so much complexity, and so much risk then to sort of get roped into things that you probably shouldn't if, you know, you were very clear about what your role is. And so, you know, this lack of like really specific like, you know, boundaries, you know, it was sort of in some ways like assuming that the client knew what the role of like an architect is and what the role of a GC is. And it's actually surprising how like infrequent that's the case. There's actually like a lot of, you know, misconception about what an architect's role in a project is. I think we're very often expected to like manage way too much of a project, specifically in terms of like dealing with trades and things like that. And it can be like a really tricky thing to do if you don't sort of like set clear boundaries. You know, on one hand, a risk is that like you're spending, you know, in this case, we spend so much time again on site. We were there, it felt like every other day again. And like this was time that we weren't billing for, time that we weren't, you know, accounting for at the beginning, time that we could have been spending on other projects, or rendering more projects or building more skills to like further our practice. I mean, obviously this project was furthering our practice as well, but you know, you need to be really efficient when you're running a practice. And you're also just like amplifying the risk of mistakes. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a lot of, you know, you're not always aware of all of the things that are going on at once, if you're not on site constantly. And so when you're asked to sort of like manage the mill worker and have that coordinated with electrical and with drywall, I mean, you're just not always privy to all of the information like a GC should be. And I mean, there's also just like a ton of experience that GCs have specifically related to project management. And so making sure that you're sort of like staying in your lane to a certain degree, it's just like it prepares the project for like much more success by allowing everyone's sort of strengths, knowledge to like really come to the table. And it's also sort of prompted this sort of like idea of like not just designing the project, but you're also sort of designing your own process along the way. And like always being mindful of like the mistakes that you're making and fine tuning, like how you find you're working best, how you're finding like sequencing things working best, and making sure that you're laying that out at the very beginning of the project with a client to make sure that you're kind of in control of the structure from the very beginning. It just ends up with a much better project and you're wasting much less time and running less risk of making costly mistakes.
The lesson 4 is you're not for everyone, and that's good. As we continue to develop our ethos as a practice and to try to grow as a business, we came across a lot of opportunities that at the time seemed like incredible opportunities that we didn't get. So at the moment, it felt like a defeat, like a failure. Like, why didn't we land this project? But I think that over time and with perspective, we realized that it's very important to define yourself as a creative. You can't be for everyone. In the same way that you don't go to the dentist and expect that he can also do your shoulder surgery. As designers, you cannot tackle everything and you cannot be for everyone. And that's just the nature of the business and the nature of how it is. So we had to learn the hard way that it's okay to not be for everyone, and that what you have to do is like focus on what you are about, develop those skills, and then the right client will find you. And in our case, it was Aesop. Aesop found us. Aesop was like they came to us. We really didn't have a lot of experience by the time they reached out, and it was a project, and it was like a relationship that still lasts a few years. And while Aesop was our yes, we had many no's before and after. To name a few that are worth naming, it was Fohring. Fohring reached out to us at the time. Again, we didn't have a lot of work, so it felt like an amazing opportunity. But after meeting with them for like over almost 2 hours, they asked, who works with you? And we were like, it's just the two of us. And they were like, you're too small to work with us. So it didn't matter the design that we could produce. It didn't matter that we were saying like, we're comfortable. They explained the project that they wanted to do, and we're like, yeah, we can do it. For them, it was like just not going to happen. So it felt bad, but at the same time, it was like, if what matters to you is how big our firm is, maybe we're not the right people. Same with Jaguar. Jaguar was working on the rebranding, and basically they were opening a showroom in Paris, in France. We did several meetings with them, and of course we wanted Jaguar, but at the same time, as we kept doing meetings and meetings, we could see that from a design standpoint, we were in opposite sides of the room. Like, we were not aligned at all. So while obviously for us, it would be a great opportunity, we were thinking like, this is really not working. And it was mutual, because eventually they went with somebody else. And then it happened with Aesop. So when Aesop reached out, here are our cats again. We're a bit obsessed with our cats, but it's okay. The reason why we put this photo is because when Aesop reached out to us, we were working from our living room. We didn't have an office. It took us 4 years to be able to afford a tiny little office. And when they reached out to us, we were working from our living room. That was Michael's computer. My computer's like, you can see the corner there. And basically our sofa was right behind us. So when a company like Aesop, that I think they have stores in 85 countries, something like crazy, they wanted to talk to us. First of all, at first we thought it was a scam. We thought that it was like, that they were going to say like, send your credit card number. And we thought it was a scam. But as we were aware that we were actually going to do a meeting with them, we were a bit like, how do we go about this? Do we try to fake it? Do we like, because this is who we were at the time. And eventually we decided to just be honest and be like, it's the two of us. We can design. We know how to design, but right now it's the two of us, and we work from our living room. They didn't care. We did several meetings. So the people that make the decisions are in Paris. So we did several meetings with the team in Paris for the design. And then for North America, they have an offices in New York. So we did meetings with the team in Paris, with the team in New York. We were from our living room. Sometimes our cat would jump in the middle of the meeting, and we had to, they didn't care. They just wanted good design, and they knew for what they had seen that they liked it. And it was good because it felt like we could be ourselves. We discussed, they were interested in our process. They were interested in like our design, what we lean towards in design. There were lots of those conversations, very intense. They didn't care. They never once asked, how many employees do you have? Things like that. It was like a very good alignment. And I think that that worked very well because this is the floor plan of Aesop Yorkville. So Aesop Yorkville was the first project that we did with them. And as Michael mentioned before, construction is an extremely complex activity. And basically, in this case, the biggest issue that came early on in the project, it was the problem that the landlord allowed them to, Aesop needs to have water on their stores. They always have a basin, and it's part of how they engage with the customers. So the landlord said, yeah, you can bring in water whenever you want, however you want, wherever you want. No, you couldn't, because there was a parking underneath, and the slab had been thickened. So it was like almost more than 3 feet thick slab. So there were very little places in the space where we could actually bring water. Or like, you can see that the bathroom is ginormous. It's not by design. It was because that was the only point in the entire store where we could actually have the toilet located. So it was very challenging. And we had to do several visits. We had to do a lot of meetings, and it was just so good to have a client that understood how we work, that they would trust that we were like, we need to go back. We need to, it was like there were problems, but problems are less of a problem when you are aligned with the client. These are some images just of they have to basically X-ray when you have to core a slab. They need to basically do like an X-ray to see where the rebar and the structure is. And basically they had to do the entire store, and there were very little places. So it was a very challenging thing, and it was good to have the support of a client that got it. In the same manner, because we felt like we could be ourselves, we could be authentic. I think that authenticity is very important in design, and being able to be yourself and not being scared of proposing things to a client is super important, because you're never going to be the best version of trying to be somebody else. So in this case, for example, the design narrative for the store was based on the Victorian houses in Yorkville. So Michael had the idea. We were thinking about what can we do with the walls? How can we treat the space? And Michael was like, why don't we get like something that is very simple, very like conventional, and use it in an unconventional way? And we came across, like, we were going for a walk in Yorkville, and we were seeing all the cute porches of the Victorian houses, and we were like, why don't we do this with the spindles? So we proposed it to them, and they really liked it, and they were like, we will need to see a prototype. So we did the cat is again in the picture. We did a prototype, we painted it on our kitchen table, took some photos, they liked it, and they moved forward. And looking back, I think, would we have even proposed something like this to Jaguar or to Holt Renfrew? The answer is no. And the answer is no, not because they're not good or anything. It was just because we couldn't be ourselves in that situation. These are some of the images of the space. And it was a very complex project. And yet I feel like it was one project where we were both very happy, because we felt like we could do what we wanted. And the client, of course, is ASOP. Their design team is architects, and we were able to have like long conversations with them. They have plenty of feedback, but it was always a very collaborative environment. And we just learned that what is important is to remain authentic. And if some people don't see the value in that because they have other preferences, it's fine. It's not a failure. It's a matter of how creativity works.
And a fun one then, sort of this was a really tricky one, a really hard lesson for us. The importance of profit, the importance of like actually being able to sustain yourself as a business and make at least a little bit of money with what you're doing. Money is super difficult to talk about. And we were always scared of asking for too much. We were scared of like pricing ourselves out of a project. But I mean, as like happy as we were with the ASOP Yorkville project, it was also like a very, very hard lesson for us. And a bit of a wake-up call for us. Like we really tracked our hours super diligently on that project for the first time, because the projects before were just so silly, it didn't even like really make sense to track our hours. So we tracked our hours really diligently on this one. And it turned out that we were making like much less than minimum wage, which was like, it was a pretty bitter pill to swallow. And I mean, it's just like it's not sustainable. Like life keeps getting more and more expensive. And you can't run a sustainable business when like, you yourselves are making less than minimum wage, let alone like sort of as a business that, in theory has overhead costs like, marketing and paying for photography and other things like that, right? And it's also, I mean, just kind of not fair. I think that's also sort of like a sort of blatant or sort of like, brutal truth in that. So the importance of getting like comfortable talking about money, became something that we had to learn how to do. As we were wrapping up the project in Yorkville, ASOP approached us to do a second store, this time in Los Angeles. And so, we were approached to do another project with the same client, and actually arguably like much less scope. So this was a floor plan of the space in Los Angeles, which is about like 60-ish% of the square footage of the space in Yorkville.
Same client and same year.
Yeah, same client, same year, smaller space. but we asked for like basically twice as much as as we got for the first project. We were very like honest and transparent and clear with, you know, how we presented that to them, because we were kind of like scared out our mind that they were going to come back to us and say, you're completely crazy. Like, how are you doing this? But I think we were able to put together like a very, very clear argument, and it was fair, it was honest, it was transparent. And there was like absolutely no pushback. We started the project seamlessly, and it went great. And actually someone from the design team, when they saw the hours and everything, like, oh, this is like, this was nice to see actually, because it's sort of like, it's very realistic, and like, you know, they're designing stores in-house and everything too, right? So for them to also see that we were sort of asking for something more fair, it was sort of empowering for other designers within the corporation, right? So, I mean, this is also part of this discussion too, is the fees that you're sort of commanding, they have a ripple effect. And this is really important. You know, and this wasn't just with like the fees in the, you know, in the initial, for the initial proposal. With the project, we wanted this like really seamless sort of surface, walls, ceiling, and floor. So we wanted everything to be finished in micro cement with these like curved details where the floor would sort of curve up into the walls and then curve into the ceiling, which was going to be really challenging to build. There were sort of many different ways that we were thinking about doing it. Also not super sure about the finish. So ESOP wanted some prototypes made in LA, and they wanted us to go out and see them. This wasn't part of the contract. And so we actually asked to have like the flight paid and our hours paid to go out and do it. We were, again, like really scared of doing this, but we didn't have it in the contract, because our contract was like 15 pages compared to the like 2 that we started with on the Deer Park House project, because we learned our lesson. And they supported us. We were sort of able to go out and do this. And so, you know, we're talking about this as like we keep referring to Odami as a business, rather than like a studio. And you know, in speaking to people sort of along the way, like they've like mentioned sort of surprise that we call it that. You know, most of us are, you know, are here because we love architecture. We're passionate about it. We believe in the importance of it. You know, we might consider it a calling. You know, and you know, there's also sort of ideas that like money and good design don't necessarily sort of go hand in hand. There's a bit of a like starving artist sort of mentality that sometimes gets associated with architects. And I think it's important to realize that like we really can't think this way. You know, we still need to buy groceries, we still need to pay rent, and like passion doesn't really do that. And so after a few years of like really barely scraping by, this really like hammered us super hard on the head. It was hard on morale, to be honest. And when your morale is low, I mean, you're not doing good work. Like this should be something joyous. And when you're not happy doing what you're doing, you don't feel fairly treated. It's pretty hard to do good work.
Yeah, and also like it's something that I think, especially as future architects, like the conditions in the industry are not great. Architects are not in the Employment Standards Act, so other types of professions are protected. Where if you work overtime, you will get paid, you will get compensated. Architecture was excluded of the Employment Standards Act, so architecture firms don't have to pay overtime. So while many professions are excluded, the assumption is that because you are excluded, your salary is going to be on the higher bracket, like doctors, for instance. It's normal that a doctor is going to work shift, but the salary of a doctor is not comparable to the salary of an architect. So in a way, it's like this needs to end. We cannot change Employment Standards Act, but we can start to realize what we bring to the table, what's our value, the time that it takes us to produce a design, and request that a client pays for what it's worth it. And I think that this is not just about making money. It's about like treating people fairly. It's about having financial security. It's about hiring employees and being able to pay them fairly, and having employees that if have to stay over time can be remunerated. So I think it's it's something that is very important. And this project, we wanted to put it because this was the first project where we actually felt like we were getting good fees, and that we were like not good fees as in like, oh, now we're rich. Good fees in the sense of like, we are comfortable and we think our time is being appreciated the right way. And I think that this was a big lesson that we learned. And moving forward, sometimes you can be flexible, of course. Sometimes you want projects, but I think that it's very important that if we don't value our profession and we don't value what we bring to the table, then who is going to do it? Who is going to tell you? What client is going to say, I'll pay you more? Like, no, you have to do it and you have to work for it yourself. And I think it's very important to lose what Michael was saying, lose that right? Can you, okay, sorry, to lose the shame of like, of talking about money. Like, it's a business. We all need to pay bills. So why don't we talk about it?
Yeah, and like, I think, you know, we started to really think about it as a sort of like responsibility that we had, not just to ourselves, but you know, as we've started to get busy, and you always sort of want to be thinking like longer term. And we do eventually, you know, we haven't had any full-time employees yet, but we want to, and when we do, we want to make sure that like we're, you know, we're responsibly participating within the profession, and we're sort of being part of the change and not sort of, you know, just replicating the lousy conditions that we might have gone through ourselves. So, and that only starts from being honest and transparent and being comfortable talking about money.
So the lesson 6 is red flags don't turn green. I think that this is about the importance of letting go. As a business, again, profitability matters. So when you think of letting go of a client or stop the pursuit of like a project, it feels like counterintuitive. Like I'm trying to make money and I'm letting go of potentially something that is going to bring revenue. We've learned the hard way that the implications of ignoring your gut instinct and continuing with a client that clearly showing signs of disrespect, signs of like lack of boundaries, things like that, when your gut feeling is telling you this is not right, we've done it and we've continued. And we have seen that the amount of time, energy, and just mental drainage that those types of clients and those types of projects bring to the table ends up making it not worth it financially, even not worth it from a mental health standpoint, but financially, it's like a black hole of time and energy. So in our case, we thought that it would not be okay to put projects of red flag clients. So Hey Sushi was an amazing project, but something that we felt that has happened, we've only fired clients twice. We've never been fired by a client, but we fired clients twice, and we have stopped pursuing a project once in a very direct manner. And I'll tell the story. But what I want to say is like, yeah, like the gossip. What I want to say is like, Hey Sushi happened. Sorry, I'll say that. Every time we've let go because we decided to bet on ourselves, we decided to trust our instinct, and we were like, this is not happening. We're walking away. Out of the 3 times that we've done this, like the next day, 2 days later, a similar project came with an amazing client. I don't know if it's karma, if it's divine alineation of the stars. I don't know what it is, but it's happened every single time. And I think Hey Sushi is a great example because 2024 was like black and white. We had a part where it was our slowest time to date. We really didn't have any work. And then we got really busy. But
like we were like desperate, you know, it was
yeah.
like 9 months of like not signing a single project, which
Yeah.
is
It
like
was
really, it's really hard.
Yeah. And so before Hey Sushi came along, green flag, not red flag, we were talking with like a person that was going to open a restaurant. We did a design meeting, then they needed another design meeting. We did another design meeting. We sent our fee proposal. He tried to cut our fees by 30%. then he was asking, he was like, I want to work with you for sure. I'm going to work with you, but I cannot sign the project yet because I don't have the lease finalized, but it's happening. And we were like, okay. And this person kept asking, can you come to meet with this contractor? Can you come? And at some point, I had to have a phone conversation. I had to say, like, this is about mutual commitment, and us doing a few things because we want to work with you doesn't mean that we can continue to do things without getting compensated. So what I proposed, I thought it was very okay to do it. It was like, if you cannot sign the contract yet, we refused to lower our fees 30%, by the way. And he said that he would be okay, which for me was also a red flag. It was like, so you could pay it, but you were just trying to lowball us. So that tells you also enough about how much he kept saying he really appreciated our work, but it was like, yeah, you were trying to get it for less. So the respect, it felt like it wasn't really there. So when I said that, I was like, if you cannot sign the contract yet, why don't we do something? We'll charge you for doing these meetings. And once we sign the proposal, we can deduct the money from there. I got a phone call, not a nice one. And basically the client, not client, but like that person that we thought we were going to be working with was telling me that he didn't like, he said, I don't appreciate your attitude. It feels like you have a checklist of all the things that you've done for me to date. And I don't like to work with people like that. And I got a bit shocked by what
Slating 101.
yeah, it was gaslighting at its finest. It was like, you have a restaurant. When people go, do you feed them for free just so that they can taste the food? You don't. So it's like, this was like not a nice conversation to have. It didn't escalate any further. But after that, the thing was, we were desperate for work. And yet after that conversation, we had that talk and we decided that we had to let this person go. I sent him an email and I said, I'm sorry, something else came along. We are not able to take on this project anymore. And we let him go. And it was tough because we were like I was considering to start looking for jobs. It was really tough. And we did that. And the next day we get an email by Jay, the owner of Hey Sushi. This is how life sometimes works. Jay told us he was opening a new location. He was passionate about our work. He seemed to know our work, a very sweet person. And we met with him 2 days later. We sent the proposal and basically we got the project signed within a week after dropping the client. We were working with Jay on his project. And the beauty of this is not just about the money and about getting work, but it's also about the type of client that is going to respect you. So while Jay didn't have a crazy budget and the restaurant was like a fairly large, so you don't get to do that much. The bigger the space is, the more expensive it's going to do things. So this is the before, not the after, by the way. So this was the space, and when we were there, it was like decades of DIYs. So it was a bit like, how can we work with this? Because his budget wasn't huge. It was like complicated, but there was a trust, there was a respect, and he was very opinionated with design. It was not like he was like, oh, whatever. He really had strong opinions about design, but it was like a lot of like just respect. Basic respect, professional respect and personal respect. So when we went to the space, Michael said like the bones might be nice. Like maybe what we have to do is instead of adding things in the space, we just get rid of everything and see the space. And when we went, this was like the first visit that we did after demolition was done. And we walked, the first time that we walked, I was a bit like, this is scary. And then we came here and it was like, this actually has really great bones. There were like a few different levels in the space, like a big industrial concrete structure. There were a lot of windows facing north. So there was like this stable light, like very nice light. So there were like a lot of things that we were able to work with that maybe light is free, like the existing structure is free, that doesn't cost money. So it was a bit like addition by subtraction, just get the thing to the bare bones and see what we can do. And by doing very minor interventions to keep the budget on time, like finishing the ceiling, because there was a lot of things happening there. On the exterior, we changed the awning to hide all the, it was like a simple perforated metal sheet, like painted white, but it was hiding all the AC and all the ducting that was poking out in the facade. And by removing like the banquettes, all the banquettes in the existing restaurant were covering like 60% of the windows. So by removing all of that, suddenly we have this beautiful space that had great bones, had great light, and it felt very nice. The floor was a cheap epoxy flooring that we color matched to go with the rest of the space. And the big lesson here was like that we put the money in very specific moments, and it's not like a high budget project, but it's a project we're super proud of. He was very happy. And I wonder sometimes it's like this other person that we let go seemingly had a much bigger budget than Jay. And I wonder something better with this other client, even if he had more budget. And the answer is absolutely not, because it was not about the money. It was about the respect and about working together. And I think that Hey Sushi is the perfect example of why being aligned with your client is important, and why it's important to, if somebody's not respecting you and you tell them once and they still don't respect you, you have to walk away. It won't be worth it and the work won't be good. It's what we've learned the hard way.
Yeah, you want to find, I mean, as much as you can, you want to be surrounded by good people that make you feel good about the work that you're doing, and that you can have like a positive relationship with, because these projects last a long time. And like, it's sort of like cutting away dead branches to allow like new growth to happen. You want to get rid of, people that are sort of only like bringing you down. And it's hard, but it pays off. Sometimes you sort of have to be like a bit tough and defend yourself too. Last lesson, we're finally there. This has been one that we've actually been like reflecting on a lot, especially lately, that we've been working on a lot more commercial projects, where all of the clients have like very, very specific needs, and they're very, very different from one another. And this is really just how important it is to be a good listener. And by sort of suspending your own ideas, and being maybe more accepting of your client's opinion, you can actually stand to do better design, not worse. I think it's, you hear so often like complaining about clients like getting in the way. Sometimes actually like embracing it can actually really, really help a project. Of course, like we're all here because we're passionate about like what we do. But yeah, I mean, it's over time, as we've like built out our portfolio, I think that we've found that the projects that we're the most proud of, very oftentimes it's because they came out of like a very open dialogue with the clients. And one of the more recent projects that we finished up, Amadeus, which is a bakery and cafe in Yorkville, I think it really exemplifies this quite well. The company sells like both breads and pastries. They have these, like you can see sort of in the image here, these like really quite elaborate, like really artful, super contemporary little cakes, as well as a lot of very rustic sourdough breads. And so when the client came to us, they were really like concerned about this, like how to bring these two seemingly opposite things together in a design. And so this was one of the first concepts that we came up with, and we were like crazy excited about this, like super, super excited. We were playing with these ideas of like folding and layering, kind of like working with dough to make bread or to make croissants. And at the same time, we were thinking about this like really dark, rich palette as a way of allowing the product to really stand out. So you have the light tones of the bread and the pastries, but also the really vibrant, colorful cakes as well. And so having a dark color on the background would really allow these to really almost feel like they're sort of like floating in a vacuum. And so, yeah, we were like over the moon about this, like so excited for our first meeting to present this to the client. And then they like absolutely hated it. It was like hated it so much. And like we were like pretty crushed, to be honest. It was like a big like wah wah. But like, I mean, by listening to them sort of explain why, it made so much sense. They talked about, I mean, fortunately, they were also like pretty articulate. Like not all clients are like really articulate in the way that they're sort of, it's very like ambiguous, and you're sort of like trying to really tease out like what they mean. They were fortunately pretty articulate. They talked about their business as a morning business. So this idea of like baking bread in the morning, like coffee in the morning, like sort of something to like wake up to, something a little bit more like lively, uplifting. And they felt that this was like very night. It was very like chocolate and red wine. And like when they said that, I was like, yeah, I mean, we had all these like ways of thinking about it that were like very like rational, and we can like write this, write the text about it right away. And it's like, but it's like what they said, it made sense, and it just like it didn't feel right, and it didn't feel right specifically for their business. And at first we were like, okay, we got to like blow it up and start all over. This is what we ended up with, and I think actually like we were able to actually like find more maybe sophistication and nuance in the narrative rather than sort of like blow it up. It actually just like added a layer on it, allowed us to like interpret it in a different way that we hadn't thought of yet. It was still really, about this sort of idea of drawing parallels between architecture and baking. So in this case, we started to think about it more as like, like precision and rigor, sort of resulting in something expressive, and dynamic and affective, something really human. So we had this one single radius curve that we ran around the entire store to sort of blend the walls into the ceiling and then down into a canopy. So one single radius throughout the whole space allowed for these like really complex moments to sort of emerge. And we think about this a lot when we talk about prospective clients now. And it's really, I think, framed our approach and helped us refine our approach. It's sort of about like letting go of yourself a bit and approaching a project with the intention of listening first, and processing and interpreting. We talk about ourselves a lot about the work that we do as interpreting, rather than sort of like coming down and sort of like laying down a design and being really bullish about it.
And I think that also it also helps to not repeat yourself. When part of your design process, you incorporate learning about the client, learning what the client wants. I think it's something that it's also like a great tool to not end up doing ABC, which is something that will happen if like a design becomes dogmatic in a way. And also it allows you to learn a lot. Like right now, as it stands, we've done clothing stores, we've done like bakeries, restaurants, cosmetic stores. And it's amazing because you get, I think that our profession is inherently curious. And I think it's very nice to be able to actually learn from other businesses, see how other people do their thing. I think it's fascinating, and it always like kind of builds up for the next restaurant. We know a few things and we'll continue to learn, but I think it's very important to be very observant and to really listen, not just for the client and not just for the design, but also for your own professional growth.
Yeah, and I think this idea of like being open and listening, it doesn't have to mean that you like give up easily on your ideas, or that you just like give in all the time. It's more just to sort of say that like by allowing yourself to get out of your comfort zone, and to listen, you can allow for like surprise to happen and for something unexpected to happen. And it can, through doing that, sort of expand your creativity, really rather than limiting it. And at least that's something that we've come to really believe in.
We're done.
They're a little bit longer, yeah.
Sorry, it went a bit longer than we were hoping. There was just so many things I wanted to share. Yes, of course. Yeah.
Or one of the mics.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was really, really great. And just before I get to my question, I wanted to say a comment. I really thought that a lot of your lessons weren't just architecture lessons. They were like kind of life lessons, and I thought that was kind of cool. Earlier on in your presentation, you talked a bit about when you were talking about furniture design. It made me think of my question. in visualizing opportunity, us as students, we often are kind of limited, or they're hard to come by in terms of like the extra things we can do. So can you talk about, sorry, just reading what I wrote, how to help us visualize it more, or what your experience with learning how to visualize opportunity and realizing it, kind of your journey along discovering what that was from being a student all the way to where you are now. Yeah, can you talk about that? Like actually being able to picture the end product of an opportunity.
I mean, I think like you just mentioned at the end of the question, the like looking towards the end helps you find a place to start, I think is like really important. So like in the case of the furniture, we knew that we wanted to exhibit in IDS and Design TO. So like this was like a year-long project basically where we knew that there was like a venue for the work at the end of it. Because I mean, and that's the other like really, really important thing, especially as you're running a practice, that like you need to get your work out. Like people need to see it. Like just doing it, sticking it up on your website, like it just dies there. You know, like at that point there was no one going to our website because no one knew who we were. Like all we had done was one project. So we had to find some opportunity that like people were just gonna see it no matter what. So that sort of started it, and then it was sort of like working our way back from there. And then, you know, fortunately things sort of worked out with Patrick and the opportunity to sort of work from the work with the tree, with the wood that came from the tree. But it was always important to have that sort of goal in mind. Otherwise, you're kind of just like doing stuff. And it might end up not really turning into something. You need a timeline, you need deadlines, you need something tangible, and ultimately something that's going to give the work meaning.
Thank you very much.
It seems that you two are wonderful designers, and I imagine that it seems like in school you were prepared for design. Would you say that your schooling prepared you for the business aspects of owning and operating a practice?
Not at all. I think that this is why we felt like this was an opportunity, like something that we wanted to share, and that's why it went a bit longer. Because I think that when going in school, they teach us like all the liabilities of an architect, all the things that you need to learn, construction detailing, all that. But not once I never had like a lesson or like a course where it was a bit about like how to structure your business, we started from zero, and basically all these lessons are not the lessons because we're so smart, are the lessons after making a million mistakes. So it's something that we wish we would have like maybe if you have a member of your family who's an architect, or you have or a business owner, yeah, it's like, but when you don't have that side to it, it's like we were newbies just learning to swim. They just threw us in the pool, or we threw ourselves in the pool, basically. Yeah. So no, we didn't have any of that. Like, I don't know, Michael, but in Spain, where I was trained, there was never that type of like course or even lecture or something like that. You could learn from, like in Spain is like not everywhere, but it's very often like in architecture school, most professors also practice. There's a few that are just academics, but it's very common that professors. So when you had a good relation with a professor, they could teach you here and there a few things, but not much. I don't know in McGill.
Not at all. Not at all.
Thank you so much.
Hi. Firstly, again, thank you for the lecture. I really appreciated it. And I just wanted to say that realizing that you came from like a millwork and trades background, like knowing what some of your projects look like, I could immediately see that and recognize the passion that you guys have for millwork and that part of design. I just wanted to know, now that you've sort of established yourself as business owners and you're not necessarily in the same position you once were, you know, working from home and everything like that, how have you managed with separating? Because it takes up a lot of your life, I imagine. Like, do you have that separation? Is it something of value for you? And like, does that eventually get easier to manage?
I'll take this one. So I don't know if you know it, but we're also married. So it's like we take the business to home. And I think that the first time that when we took the leap of like, we need an office space, it was because it was unbearable. Like we disagree in a lot of things. And I think that that's part of the strength of our design, that we come from very different backgrounds and we fight a lot professionally. So it was hard at times where it was like, okay, we just had an argument, like a professional argument because we disagree. And now let's go make dinner and sit together and like nothing happened. That was not good. And I think that it is very tough. And especially when there's issues, when there's stress, I think it's tough. That's why for us, having an office space became like something that was so important and something very silly. But the idea of getting home and instead of going directly from the office to home, just going for a walk. Like even if it's a 15-minute walk where we can just let go of everything, swear as much as we need to, and then go home and try to separate that. I think that that's the one thing that helped us, but it is very challenging. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super hard.
Yeah.
But having a physical separation was, I mean, it helped a lot. That was like a really pivotal shift for us, but you're constantly working on it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much again for your presentation. It was really nice. I wanted to know, how are the clients finding you? And for example, for your first project, it was a whole restaurant. How did you gain their trust so they would give you the whole restaurant to design? And then for your next clients, the ASOP, Jaguar, how did they approach you? Is it like a certain, do you go to them? For example, you mentioned create your own opportunities. Do you approach them or they found you?
We were fortunate in that they found us. I mean, it's very common business practice to do like active business development where you're, finding potential clients and you're actually like reaching out and contacting people and trying to sort of build relationships. We're terrible at that. We're both like relatively like shy people, and like that's something we're super uncomfortable with, to be honest. And so like our strategy has been more just like try to get as many publications as possible and just like push the work out and like get it in front of people for people to see. And like so far, that's largely been how people have found us. They found us on Instagram or in design publications. There's been some like word of mouth through that as well, through like past clients and everything. But ASOP found us because they saw we asked them, because I mean, we were shocked as hell, to be honest. Like when they wrote to us, we couldn't believe it. So we asked them, like, how did you guys even like find us? And they like opened up IDS and Design TO and like went through the list of firms and opened up a bunch of websites, and ours caught their eye and they contacted us. So that was very much just that. It was like doing work that you love, that you identify with, that you think represents you. Because not every project will, but doing work without, just on our own allowed us to do that. And they found us because of that. And it was really the same thing with Sarah too. I mean, we had exhibited in Design TO the year prior. The owner of the restaurant saw it was like another little furniture thing that they liked a lot. And they happened to be like friends of a friend of a colleague that I met in like a week that I was attending Daniel's. So, I mean, that's sort of another thing too, is like, talking to people as much as you can and like not saying no to opportunities when they're put in front of you to do something interesting. You never know when things might turn into something years down the road. So yeah, it's been a combination of getting work out there as much as we possibly can, pursuing publications, building relationships with publications. And just doing work, keeping busy.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I was just wondering if you guys ever considered partnering with other firms when you got a client.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, we were just like, have we done it? We've done it. For example, when we did ASOP in LA, we needed an architect of record. So we were partnering with other people. And I think that in the past, like we are collaborative, but I think it's also thinking about doing design collaborations. I think it's also very important there's a distinct, we're actually now doing a design collaboration as well. We are, but I think it's also very important, like collaboration is great, but I think that there has to be a clear delineation about the strengths of each person so that each one can contribute to its finest. So we've done it. We're doing it actually. I was like a bit like, we're actually doing it now. We've done it in the past. And I think it's important, like, yeah, to meet the people. And if there's a clear alignment and things seem to be working like that, you have the same similar interests, but each person kind of, we know what each one of us brings to the table. I think that collaborations can be a great way of doing work. Yeah.
We've also had to out of necessity also. I mean, with the ASOP store, for example, it was an assembly occupancy in like a high, yeah, ASOP was. Well, yeah, and then it was, sorry, like retail, yeah. But we weren't able to stamp it. It was in like a high-rise building. And it was with an occupancy that we weren't technically able to stamp. So we had to partner with an architect of record and sort of arrange to have them stamp drawings for permit because we weren't able to. So, I mean, we've had to do that on a few occasions for other retail projects as well. So yeah, I mean, you find ways of doing work that even you're technically not like licensed to do. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to.
Okay, this is the last question.
I had a question about contracting in like North America, in like Ontario. There's like an issue, with kind of generic designs. So contractors I find are like skilled to do generic designs. And since you guys are a bit more design oriented, like contractor to do your type of work? You just kind of have like one contractor that you have a special relationship with, or is it like a different contractor per project? Or like how do you find the right contractor that's a bit more skilled, and how do you communicate with them?
It's been a bit of a mix. We have one contractor that we've worked with on I think 4 projects now. And I mean, we built like a great relationship with them, and we would work with them on every project if we could. They're amazing communicators. They're great because they actually hire like architects to be their site supervisors. So there's like an amazing level of communication there. But it's all over the place. Some clients, like they already have their contractor that they bring in. That happens often enough. There are clients that'll reach out to contractors before they'll reach out to designers, and it sort of goes in the other direction. And we just find a way of working with them. I mean, sometimes they're great. And sometimes they're not. Which is where, like, you have to have excellent drawings. You have to lay everything out super clearly, overdraw, if you really have to. And just make sure that like there's no like room for misinterpretation in certain cases where like you don't know that you fully trust the contractor. If something's not done properly, it makes it a lot easier to sort of go back and refer to the drawings and say, like, it was actually drawn this way. This is the way it was supposed to be done. You need to do it this way. Unfortunately, it's a tough conversation to have, but you at least have, the ability to sort of like fall back on something and state explicitly. So it's kind of all over the place, but.
Yeah, I think that like even with like contractors, we have contractors that we like to work, but not every contractor is right for every work. And sometimes like we will recommend, but ultimately it's something that the client decides who they want to hire, as ultimately they'll be paying. But one thing is what Michael was saying. I think that in school, they instill the importance of knowing how to draw, the importance of understanding what needs to be detailed versus what doesn't have to be detailed. And I think that when you work with contractors and when you start like building work, you realize that ultimately drawings are communication. And if your drawings are good, it doesn't matter who is going to be building that. It might take more conversation, but if you draw something, you're giving direction about something. So as long as the set is complete and the details are there, sometimes it's more challenging with certain contractors because, as you said, there's a lot of like contractors that they know their A, B, C type of details, and when you try to take them out of that, it's a bit like a problem. But ultimately, when you draw it, you discuss it. It's a bit more work, but as long as it's in the drawings, I think that generally it's fine. Yeah, I think it's doable.
I think we'll end there, but I wanted to thank you so much for your talk tonight. I think architects don't often open up about difficulties. And so it was super refreshing to hear you talk so openly and honestly about starting a practice. I'm sure there are many students here in the room that hope to start a practice one day. So thank you very much.